The world is melting outside. A good day to stay in and watch Up North at 4. And can I interest you in murder? That's right. We'll learn about a murder near a Boulder Junction lake from nearly a century ago. We'll get to that in a bit, but first, here's your top 4 at 4. Welcome back to Up North at 4. I am now joined by a new member. I shouldn't say that. A new addition to this. Okay, I'm going to try again. Welcome back to Up North at 4. I'm now joined by Kay Kranz from the Manitowish Waters Historical Society, though she's joining us from sunny South Carolina, but still counts. Kay, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm doing well. I'm really excited to hear about the murder on Big Lake, and I don't need to talk about it anymore because that's enough of a sell for people. So tell us about the murder on Big Lake.
Well, we have to take ourselves back to 1922. Northern Wisconsin was a wilderness, and Big Lake was the summer home of some very wealthy families from Chicago, Racine, and Milwaukee. And these families had full-time caretakers. So the caretakers lived year-round on Big Lake, but it was a very lonely, lonely place in the winter. We're talking probably, we have 3 full-time caretakers, and we have Jack Powers and his wife and Jack Donahue living on the lake at the time. So it's very, very lonely for people. So they want to get together and have parties, but the 3 caretakers, families, the Blahas, the Heidemans, and the Bovies are told by the owners of the properties to never socialize with the Powers or Donahue because they're bad people. They're bootleggers. They're making moonshine, and that keeps them isolated. Plus, Powers is noted to have a very bad temper and kind of a scary guy. So, open the story. Jack Powers has returned from southern Wisconsin. We do not know if he's delivered bootleg whiskey or if he has just come back from a trip. But he and his wife spend the afternoon together on a Saturday. And by 9 o'clock at night, he's already in his bedclothes, but tells his wife he's going over to Jack Donahue's, which is about 40 feet away, his cottage. And they get together, and Mrs. Powers goes to bed. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, the door is being rapped on, and enter Jack Donahue to tell Mrs. Powers that he has just killed her husband. Blood all over his hands, face looking really, really pale. And he makes her go to see the body. He's set it up in an ice house, and whether he still has any breath left in him or not, he's going to be frozen to death probably in a half an hour, if not already dead. Mrs. Powers says that Donahue relates to her that she is now his and will remain his and must stay with him forever. So they go back to the Powers house, and she says he's never cruel to her, but in 8 days of being held hostage, she is tied up every time he leaves the house. The only time she has freedom is to go to the outhouse. And one trip to the outhouse, she has scribbled a note on a crumpled piece of paper that she's being held hostage and that her husband has been killed by Donahue. She sneaks down to the lake where there's a path, puts a stick in the snowbank, and then puts this crumpled piece of paper close to the snow so Donahue doesn't notice, but hoping that a passerby will see it. She goes back to the house, and Donahue never notices the note. Now, the first time there's any contact is a Mr. John Iverson. There's a lot of Johns in this story. John Donahue, John Powers, and John Iverson comes by to deliver the mail. And when he delivers the mail, raps on the door, is all excited just to visit for a few minutes, opens the door and sees Jack Donahue with a rifle in his hand behind Mrs. Powers.
All right, we're going to pause right there, Kay. We'll come back after the break and finish the story.
Donahue directs Iverson to sit down and empty his pockets of money because he needs cash. Iverson just looks at him like, what's going on? And kind of gives him a smile and says, well, here, I got a grand total of 35 cents for you. Donahue then insists that he drink some moonshine with him, and they sit down and they drink 3, 4, 5 glasses of moonshine and get pretty lit up. And Donahue tells him what he's done. And Iverson's thinking, how am I going to get out of here? You know, I got to get out of here and get help. And he starts talking to Donahue and convincing him that, well, maybe you killed him in self-defense. You guys got into a fight. We're not sure what your fight was about, and I don't want to know. But he says, if you just killed him in self-defense, nobody's going to accuse you of murder. You'll be fine. You got to let me go, because if I don't go, the Blahas, who I've been helping take care of the Manitowoc Club on the lake, will know I'm gone and they'll come looking for me. So he gets out of there and he rushes back to Blahas. The Blahas have just returned from a vacation, and they want Jack to spend the night because there's going to be a party on the lake tomorrow. So Iverson says, I got to get back home. I'm going back to Rest Lake, which is in Manitowish, or Spider Lake at the time. And he says, I'm just kind of going to go home. And they're going, we're going to Heideman's. We're going to have a chicken dinner. Why won't you come with? And he says, I got to go home. Mrs. Blaha thought that was a little weird because they always had fun together. But anyways, Iverson goes off on his trip home and calls the deputy sheriff in the area, W.O. Strandberg, who lives in Spider Lake. And he calls Gaffney, the sheriff of Vilas County, down in Eagle River, and they make a plan. Tells Strandberg to go and get 3 other guys, deputize them, take them out to Big Lake, and there they can stay at a place. And Strandberg says, I know just the place. The Keith Farm has a nice farmhouse we can hide out in overnight and make sure we keep track of Powers. So they go out there that night, spend the night, and in the morning, the 4 men go off to the barn, which is on Scotch Point, which you can see on the map. And at Scotch Point, which is at the time called Powers Point, there's a horse and barn. They know that Powers has to come feed that horse every morning, or Mrs. Powers or Donahue, somebody. So they wait. Mrs. Powers, in the meantime, has no idea what's going on, but she convinces Donahue to let her go by herself to feed the horse. She says, you're tired, you're stressed out, you just got to relax. I'm not going anywhere. I'll come right back. He lets her go. She goes across the lake, up to the point, into the barn, and somebody yells, hands up. She goes, oh my gosh, be quiet, be quiet. Donahue's going to hear you and he's going to kill me. And she gets hysterical. And they gather her together and take her to a place where she's safe and hope she can calm down. But she is really a psychological mess by this time. So they call Gaffney, Sheriff Gaffney, who has arrived in Manitowish, and said, hey, we got Mrs. Powers. Donahue's at the cabin. We can take care of him. So Gaffney's now in Manitowish, which is 18 miles by foot on snowshoes to get to the lake. So they go to the lake, and by the next morning, it takes them all night to get there. The next morning, they all form a great big horseshoe shape around the lake and call out to Donahue, come out and surrender, Donahue. We got you surrounded. Donahue comes out of the cabin with the rifle, aims it right towards the sheriff who's standing in the middle of the lake, and says, come and get me. Runs back into the cabin, and there he opens fire. Well, there are gunshots for hours. They're shooting back and forth. He's got lots of ammunition. The sheriff has brought a great big bag of ammunition, according to Mrs. Blaha. And it is said that he told them to take him dead or alive. Didn't matter. So the posse's out there shooting. People way over on Island Lake, Rest Lake, they can hear the gunfire even. Finally, the cabin is silent. Nothing's coming from it. So this posse of 16 men surround it, go inside, and there, Jack Donahue has put himself in the root cellar and shot himself through the head. He pinned a note right on his shirt, and it said, I killed Jack Powers, and I'm glad I did it. Well, the deputies look, And there is a Victrola sitting in the corner, untouched, while some of the men are wrapping the body in a blanket to carry it by snowshoes back to Manitowish and then down to Rhinelander, where they're going to pronounce him dead. They turn on a record, and on that record is the hit song of 1920, The Love Nest.
Many builders there have been since the world began. Palace, cottage, mansion, inn, they have built for man. Some were small and some were tall, long or wide or low. But the best one of them all, Jack built long ago, 'twas built in bygone days, yet millions sing its praise.
So now the newspaper articles go all over the country. I mean, this isn't just a murder that happened in northern Wisconsin. I found news coverage of it in Montana, in Texas, in Wyoming, in California. And in that, there are two reasons for the murder. No one knows for sure whether everybody used license in telling the story. They decided it was either a love triangle, thus the song The Love Nest and referring to the place as the Love Nest, or the moonshiners were in a fight over money and one of them killed the other one. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And there's lots more stories about Big Lake that you can enjoy if you want to hear them.
I was fully enraptured that whole time, Kate. Thanks so much for sharing that story. That is, I can see why I got national coverage. It is quite salacious. So thank you for sharing.